Hello, my name is Janne Pirttilahti. I'm Director for New Services with F-Secure Cyber Security Business Unit. I want to welcome you to this last episode of our webinar series this autumn and this year. This show will be recorded and the recording link will be sent to those registered in a couple of days' time. Today we are focusing on how to predict cyber threats and the threat landscape overall. We will walk through some of the definitions. What are the things you can do? Why would you do those in the first place? Touch upon some real-life examples and then give you a couple of very practical tips. The whole show will take about 30 to 45 minutes with questions and answers at the end. So please do submit your questions to the chat during the presentation and we will take those at the end. In the previous episodes of this webinar series, we've already covered detect, respond and prevent sections of the holistic cybersecurity model that we are using and showing on the slide. Today, we will focus on the predict section. How to assess your risk, how to be prepared. Dictionary definition for predict is actually quite intriguing. It talks about foretelling the future. How to foretell something based on the observation, experience, or even scientific reasoning. And predicting cyber threats is very much the same thing. We try to foretell about the threats, what may or what will happen in the future, based on what is happening now, what is the expertise, and even scientific or at least good reasons to believe that something will happen. You would do this to foretell the future for obvious reasons. Everybody has questions like, where should I invest money? Nobody has unlimited security budgets. We need to make choices. We need to be aware what are the top risks and top threats that are of our concern. And they may be different to different organizations. What is a massive threat to me may not be a big threat at all to the gentleman next to me. I want to be able to prioritize also how to train my people. I can't make everybody in an organization security experts, but I definitely can train and raise awareness. But again, we need to be very selective. So we need to prepare. In general, we want to prioritize and we want to be prepared. When put like that, it sounds rather obvious and sounds like everybody must be doing this, right? Probably everybody is. You are doing, everybody in the industry and in any industry is doing this based on good data. Well, research does show the complete opposite. Research shows us that most organizations are not adequately, if at all, prepared against a cyber threat or an attack. And it's not only research. We have practical evidence backing this up. I'm going to walk through a couple of real-life cases, not to point fingers on any of these organizations that you're going to see in a minute. But these were public news. These are big cases. That's to say, for every of these big cases, there are similar, maybe even equal size, but at least smaller cases in great numbers. They just didn't make it to headline news. And I was only able to select a couple of these. But let's go to the first real-life example. What happened and what could have been done to maybe even prevent this, but at least to predict it. TokTok in UK was attacked, breached through their website. Now we don't know, based on the publicly available information, what type of vulnerability exactly was used. But nevertheless, they were breached and 157,000 user accounts or credentials or whatever were breached in this attack. Now, given the size of the TokTok, it doesn't sound like a massive magnitude, but it's a lot of data. What makes this particular case interesting and why I chose this as an example is that this was the second time a very similar thing was done against TokTok within 12 months' time. Meaning that they must have been well aware that they were a target. Now, some organizations are well aware that they are a target, but not everybody is, even though they should and could be better aware that they indeed are a target. Another example, not necessarily so targeted attack, is the Think W3 Limited. Another UK company, by the way. In this case, massive amount, almost 1.2 million credit card details and debit card details were leaked because of an SQL injection on their website. Now, SQL injections are perhaps the oldest trick in the book for any adversary in the internet. These have been around pretty much as long as the internet, the way we know it today, has been. So, a couple of decades. Yet, in 2014, these guys were not able to protect themselves against such a trivial and well-known attack, even though they were handling credit card information for millions of people. To me, this is a sign of not being adequately prepared. Next example, again different in nature, but definitely not a targeted one, or most likely not a targeted one, is Mumsnet. They were a victim of so-called Heartbleed vulnerability, which is by now, and actually was already by the time of the attack, a well-known SSL vulnerability. What makes that particularly interesting is that it was widely publicized, even mainstream media news. So everybody knew that the vulnerability is out there. But many companies, again, this is an example, but many others as well were breached because they failed to react in time. Heartbleed became public and it became exploited very soon after. So there was very little time. And it was of utmost importance for anybody to make the correct assessment. Am I endangered? And what should I do right now? And many companies failed in either one of these. They failed to either assess that they are endangered in the first place, or they failed to take the right corrective measures. And this is an example of such company. Next one is from the US. Horry County Schools District, a kind of mundane thing. School district in South Carolina hit by a ransomware. And unfortunately, I have to say that ransomware by now is a mundane thing. Companies get hit by ransomware from left and right every day. And some of them end up paying the ransoms, hence criminals make money. Why I chose to talk about this is the thing that they didn't do. They probably had actually appropriate countermeasures and protective software and what have you in most of their servers, systems. But the thing that makes this very, very interesting is that they had a server they thought should be offline. So they were not prepared to get attacked on that server. They forgot, which is a very human thing to do. But you also need to somehow assess these things. What do you have, and what is still online, and what should be taken offline immediately after it's of no use or no value anymore. And they ended up paying ransoms, by the way, because they didn't have backups. The last one, different from these direct breaches and vulnerabilities, a little bit different at least, is the very topical, even as of today, example of Mirai. Mirai is a botnet or family of botnets currently out wild still infecting IoT devices, mostly home routers, DVR systems and such alike. Mirai became very, very widespread and big when the source code was made public on October 16th this year, so not too long ago, a couple of months. Now by that time, any security expert would have been able to tell that because the source code was made public and these IoT devices are powerful enough to participate in DDoS attacks, such botnets will be seen, and we will see more of those in the near future before everybody is properly protected against Mirai. Yet, many telecom operators, and why I'm picking on telecom operators here is that they are the ones who have a lot of IoT devices, such as home routers, in their network and kind of under their responsibility. Many failed to take any countermeasures beforehand, or if those were impossible, at least they could have been better prepared to then respond when something actually happens. Again, not pointing fingers, but Deutsche Telekom was big news. 900,000 Deutsche Telekom users were knocked offline because their routers got infected by Mirai mutated version of Mirai. And coincidentally, this happened exactly a month after Mirai source code was leaked. So actually it didn't take a long time, yet a month, in my opinion, is ample time to prepare yourself. And if you can't patch all those devices, at least you can be well prepared to then do something. Think ahead. What will you do if such thing happens? Maybe they did. Maybe one of the others did indeed take appropriate countermeasures. But we know that not everybody does, even though the information is most of the time publicly available. Such vulnerabilities are out there. They are attacking this type of companies, this type of devices, and the company should know that we have such devices, we have such servers, but not always they do. So actually, predictive measures, countermeasures to tackle cybersecurity threats are a combination of two things. And I claim that there isn't one without the other. One needs to have appropriate asset management and vulnerability management, systems, tools, and data. But also threat intelligence, understanding the threat landscape, what is out there, and predicting also a little bit to the foreseeable future what will or may happen. And indeed, there isn't one without the other, because if you only have the best threat intelligence in the world, and you understand everything, that this may happen, this absolutely will happen, you easily become horizontal schools. And you forget that you had something that should have been taken offline. Don't become horizontal schools. But also, if you only have the best asset management systems, the vulnerability management software, and you have the endpoint protections and firewalls and what have you, you can still be hit by an O-day attack or something that's not even an O-day, but still so new that the protective measures are not quite there, or you failed to apply them in time. You become Mumsnet. Don't do that either. So you truly need the combination of these two. I'm going to spend today a little bit more time on the threat intelligence, because that's perhaps more intriguing, more fashionable, and a bigger topic. But I'm going to touch on the asset management very briefly, because I do think that it is the foundation. And for somebody who doesn't have either of these, I would say that you need to do this first. You need to understand which systems you have, which operating systems are you running, and so on and so forth. Also, what kind of data you have, and is it of any interest to anybody? May you become, for example, a victim of a targeted attack. On the slide, we have a couple of examples. On the left-hand side, a screenshot of Riddler.io, which is a free tool from F-Secure. You can go to riddler.io, map your attack surface, see which web services you have, which are linked to your domain, what type of meta information they are exposing to the internet. And actually, when larger organizations have used Riddler, they often find things that should not have been online at all, or at least not publicly in the internet. On the right-hand side, we have a screenshot of a typical vulnerability management tool. This one is ours, it's Radar, but there are many others as well in the market. And most of these tools, I would say all of these tools have two key functionalities. They have the asset discovery. They can scan the network and tell you that these are the servers you have, these are roughly the operating system versions you are running on your Windows boxes, Linux boxes, Cisco routers, what have you. And then also they are able to assess known vulnerabilities. In this box, you do have these vulnerabilities and you could and maybe should patch them. Again, very useful tools, widely available, not so much for free. Riddler is free, Radar from us is commercial, but you can find alternatives on both of the categories. And I strongly recommend, if you don't do either of these, look into the available solutions and think about, would you benefit from one? But then, to the threat intelligence, because as I said, perhaps more interesting, and there is more to talk about threat intelligence. It's important because, as the saying goes, forewarned is forearmed. If you are able to tell the future, you are well equipped to face the future. The problem with threat intelligence is not the definition. Gartner defines it very precisely. A well-known analyst company says that threat intelligence is evidence-based knowledge about menaces or hazards to assets. And they also continue by saying that any CISO out there should prepare themselves and their organizations not just against current threats, but also against threats that are emerging even in years to come. So simple. Now, the tricky part is that even though many companies in industry, security industry, like F-Secure, have been doing threat intelligence for our own purposes for years and years, this is still relatively new for all other companies, for those who are not security experts. And if you talk to security companies even, or you talk to somebody else, they may define threat intelligence by using any of the acronyms you can see on the slide and talk very credibly around it. And they are absolutely right. All of these are relevant, and maybe more. For somebody, threat intelligence is about indicators of compromises, IOCs. They are about MD5 hashes and SHA-1 hashes, which are typically used as file identifiers. It's about taxi and sticks, exchanging threat intelligence information in well-defined format. And for somebody else, at the other extreme, it is about human intelligence, somebody browsing through darknet forums, looking for specific keywords, and then writing an analyst report manually and warning you ahead that this type of a DDoS attack is being planned in this forum, or this type of breach data, including your company credentials, is being sold in the darknet, and you should be aware. And none of these solutions is wrong. They are all absolutely right. So there are plenty of solutions, plenty of data. The difficulty is what is actually relevant to an organization who doesn't have anything as of today, and what benefits you the most. I want to take a time to split these actually into categories. I start from the top of the pyramid with strategic threat intelligence. Strategic threat intelligence is data that helps you to make decisions such as, do I need a CASP solution, a cloud access security broker solution? Or what is CASP in the first place? I have this much money. Should I buy a new firewall, a new IDS, new endpoint detection and remediation, or something completely different? How do we benchmark against industry, our peers, our geography, in our geography? How do I tell about all this to my leadership team or to my board of directors? And so on and so forth. What does GDPR mean to us? A new legislation coming in EU. These type of questions are of typical nature to strategic threat intelligence to answer. So it deals with very, very high level information in a way, but it is built on understanding the tactical operational landscape. What is out there right now? What is prevalent? And how is the landscape changing? You don't necessarily need this level of information, but if you choose to acquire strategic information, the one who does strategic for you absolutely needs to understand and deal with the operational level as well. That's pivotal. Whereas the operational level threat intelligence is typically targeted for security operations center. If you have one, they would definitely benefit from having this level of information. It is information such as Heartbleed is now coming out or is out, announced, and it means this. It is impacting these type of systems. These are the countermeasures one can take. It helps you to make decisions. Because if you see that there is a new vulnerability or emerging threat against Oracle database servers, for an example, you don't need to care about that if you don't have any Oracle database servers. This is also about things like Mirai source code now leaked and maybe an expert opinion around it that it will take from weeks to maybe a couple of months before we see widespread mutations out there. And this is why you need to be concerned or not concerned, because you may or may not have these IoT devices. So it's about threat prevalence, it's about what's out there right now, dealing with information that is to become relevant to you within days or months or weeks to come. But still very much foretelling and very much actually based upon some data. It's not only data. It is about expert opinions, it's about assessments, what is major, what is minor, and so on and so forth. And lastly, there is the bottommost layer of the pyramid, often referred as technical threat intelligence or machine-readable threat intelligence, MRTI. I actually claim that this is no intelligence. This is threat data. But it's still useful and maybe even needed to build the operational landscape and opinions and so on and so forth. And for some organizations, this is useful still, even though it's not intelligence, but it's useful to be able to block, for example, incoming traffic from known bad IP addresses. And that's what technical threat intelligence is about. Unfortunately, every so often nowadays, when somebody talks about threat intelligence, they only refer to this layer. And I don't think that for most organizations this is actually the important one. You may benefit from it and it may be worth doing, but it's very seldom the most important piece in your whole security puzzle. So this is truly about massive amount of data, indicators of compromise, IP addresses, file hashes, so on and so forth. It must be processed automatically because it also gets old very soon. Something that I block today may not be relevant tomorrow or even in 2 hours anymore. So we have these 3 layers, and it's paramount to think what matters the most to you and start from that layer and then maybe expand and build a roadmap. This year we're going to do this. Next year we're going to expand upwards or downwards or to both directions, depending on what type of an organization you are. We've seen and observed that many organizations choose to start from free tools. I don't want to bash that approach. Actually, quite the contrary, I want to raise something. For pure machine-readable threat intelligence, if you feel that you need it, there are free sources available. There are also good commercial sources available. If you do this, and if you think that you need something to steer your firewall or CM solution, be it commercial or free option, I highly recommend you to look at Sticks as a format of threat intelligence and Taxi as exchange format or protocol. So these two are open protocol and definition of threat intelligence information and exchange thereof. They are kind of emerging technologies but quickly becoming de facto standards. And for Taxi specifically, there is an interesting website called Halo Taxi, which will list or does list a lot of both free and commercial options for threat intelligence. And you may want to look at that if you are interested in very technical information about IOCs. But as said, for most organizations, I don't think this is the one to start with. On the other hand, if we look at the higher level of information, we look at the predictions. Well, actually, if we look at the super high level, we look at the predictions. There are plenty of those available also from ourselves, from our competitors, and from many analyst companies. Latter tends to be commercial information, but still, there are predictive reports about threat landscape, how will it look like in a year's time, what has happened in the past year, and how do companies assess that to evolve. You can go about those, Google, find something. The challenge if you do this purely based on free sources is you need to assess the credibility yourself, and you need to go through a lot of trouble. You need to have some expertise. So actually, while we see that many companies do start with free solutions, I say that free solutions are best fit for those who actually have security experts and who have security operations centers and so on and so forth. If you don't have anything, you are better off perhaps by talking to an expert. And even if you had a security operations center and trained security people, still experts like ourselves and our competition do add value, because we do this as 24/7 operations. We've done this for decades. Even though threat intelligence sold to any business is a relatively new field, that's what is our essence. We base our protective products around threat intelligence. We need to understand the threats and predict them to be able to create effective preventive solutions. But even if you choose to go to any expert, it's still not easy. Because actually, it can be quite laborsome, even extravagant, to procure threat intelligence. If you use free or commercial, doesn't really change this. It's laborsome from three perspectives. From the left-hand side of this slide, we recognize that there is plenty of data and different data sources, which together form a global landscape. Now, there is nothing wrong with the global landscape. You actually need the global landscape, and you do benefit from that. The challenge is, however, that if you are, for example, a bank, a brick-and-mortar retailer, or a pure e-commerce operation, the threats you are facing and the importance of those is quite different one another. Something that is highly relevant to pure e-commerce operation, and they absolutely need to react to and be prepared, may not be the most important thing for somebody else, and the opposite is true. So you can narrow that down by selecting geography, selecting your operational domain, and so on and so forth. But there is also the approach from the right-hand side that we need to recognize. No expert can actually give you strategic guidance and threat intelligence unless they truly understand your systems and your data. So actually, typically you need combination of your experts, your risk management people, and somebody who is expert in threat intelligence. And ideally, you would combine these together. And then you are almost reaching a holy grail of threat intelligence. Making it truly actionable, You know what is important to you. You know what are the major risks, and you know what type of threats are out there. And then you can make good choices. These are the ones I am trying to prevent. These are the ones we can't prevent, but we still need to be prepared, and so on and so forth. Bear in mind that even actionable intelligence is worth nothing if you don't indeed do the actions. It is a process. And this is where all ties together. While predictive measures are kind of foundation, they also require this everything else around them to be effective. You need to feed the predictive information to preventive measures and tools, and so on and so forth. You need to look at holistic cybersecurity. I want to leave you with a couple of closing words before we open it to questions and answers. First, restating that understanding your own environment is paramount. The one who doesn't understand their own environment doesn't benefit from threat intelligence. There are both commercial and free options out there, plenty. So think about what matters to you and look for those alternatives that best fit into your solution or give you the solution that you need. So really start figuring out what is the number one problem and what is the number one question you want to answer. Is it the investment prioritization, or is it the ultimate protection of some known system? Because that may also be the case for somebody. And lastly, the absolute final sentence is that threat intelligence can greatly improve your security posture. So don't ignore it either. Don't be afraid that it's too difficult or too expensive. It's necessary not. But you can't just jump into threat intelligence and think of it as some kind of a silver bullet that will take all of your security problems away. That's not the case. It will simply help you in the whole process.